All right, let's jump into our first objective, which is all about building relevance in the social studies classroom. How does Newsela help you out with that? And I have compiled a few ways to do this. And if you want, feel free to take a picture of this. Just lots of different ways that a few places you can look for each of these avenues of building relevance. So if you're trying to, establish relevance by looking at how a topic is back in the news, we have tons of news content. Newsela publishes between 5 and 10 articles a week. So if something happened, you'll find a resource on it that's accessible for students. We have our History Comes to Life collection, which speaks a little bit about pre-curating past events with current breaking news, as some of us in the chat said that they like to do. Maybe it was Suzanne who said that. That's a great one that you can look at for some resources that are pre-curated. Secondly, featuring a local connection. What was the role of your state in Manifest Destiny? I'm from Northern California, where the Ohlone Indigenous group lives, and I wanted to learn about them past and present. We can learn about them through state-specific collections in California, discovering my state, and I can even use the text leveler on Newsela to take any article that I'd like and have it available in the reading level I'd love for my students, in addition to that search bar as well. Thirdly, if we want to help students reflect student experiences and identities, there's a ton of ways we can do that. We'll talk a little bit about Heritage Months and kids and teens news later, but holidays and memorials. Why does our society celebrate Labor Day? Why are you off for this day? What does that mean? How can we dig into how this came to be and what it really says about our society? And fourthly, if you're trying to introduce a compelling question, this can sometimes be the one that takes the most amount of time, keeps me up at night. You can take a look at our inquiry design resources, our mini inquiries, which take 1 to 2 days and not a whole unit, our complex topics like, what are the dangers of AI today, and our real world connection videos. So having a question drive our thinking is a really tough thing to plan for our unit. And we have tons of great resources that you can do to that. Now, I talked over a few of these. There are a couple I want to jump into to show you and give you some resources of how you can access them yourself. Let's talk a little bit about some featured collections. Kids and Teens, Elementary Spotlight Collection, C3 Teachers Inquiries for Elementary School, and Heritage Months. And I'm going to give you some of the links to this right now. And then at the end of our session too, I have a little takeaway so you have it all in one place, especially if you're still trying to turn your brain on in this summertime like myself. Let's jump into the Kids and Teens collection. I'm going to put that link into our chat. Feel free to follow along with that as well. I will put it here, and I can find that by going to my content library and going to news. You'll notice that our news categories are, our news collection is different categories like kids and teens. Now, I love this as we are trying to reflect student experiences. We can show them that they and their peers can be change makers in our society. So I love this one where a Chicago school students are helping bring solar energy to their campus to really emphasize that students have a sense of agency in their life and their community. So I encourage you to take a look at our Kids and Teens collection. Additionally, we have our elementary spotlight collection. I think sometimes in elementary school, social studies can get a bit of short shrift, right? Sometimes people are focused a lot on math and reading, and I want to make sure that social studies educators have really great resources to make social studies relevant. So if we go into our elementary spotlight collection, I'll click our social studies collection here. I put it in your chat so you have a quick way to do it, but I'll teach you how to fish as well. I'll go to supplemental social studies collections where I'll click the elementary spotlight collection. Take a look at this. We can engage students in some eerie history. We can talk about Day of the Dead. What is this day? Maybe they've seen Coco. What is this day that comes after Halloween? And how does it relate to Mexican cultural heritage and celebrations? What I love about this is not only does it give you great resources in one place, it has a lesson spark on the right-hand side. So it takes the guesswork out of how the heck do I use this in my classroom? What do I do first? What do I do second? What are some graphic organizers that are hyperlinked so that I can make sure that I am able to lead students to my desired learning and objective. And I even have a STEAM challenge at the end. That's science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. I love any opportunity that this can be cross curricular, especially at the elementary level. So, great resources to tell you how the heck you can use this in your classroom. All right. And our next featured collection today are See Through Teachers' Inquiries for Elementary School. So, the National Council for Social Studies came up with the college career and civic readiness as this framework for how we should teach social studies, not just at the secondary level, but at the elementary level as well. And a lot of times, inquiry based learning, we think of at that secondary learning. And we want to avoid that because inquiry based learning, as you can find it in your social studies collection, is a great way to increase content knowledge and skill development concurrently. So it's actually a process that's greater than its part. The sum of it is greater than its parts, where students are able to be driven by one question that allows them to answer in the way that their evidence and their thinking leads them, and we can make their thinking part of the learning process. As I said, that takes a ton of work to do. Can we have a vetted collection that we can just copy paste, or that we can then customized for our classroom? So take a look at this. One of our participants said that they love teaching immigration. Let's click this open for some pre-curated materials on immigration. And this is a whole unit that you can use. Take a look at these. Each of these are topics here. So on the right-hand side, I have a unit implementation guide. How am I going to use this topic by topic? How do I tie these together? How does this align to the National Council for Social Studies framework? How should I pace it? We have a performance task that it helps us do at the end, but I'll jump into this first one, the New Colossus, Emma Lazarus poem on the Statue of Liberty. How can we stage this compelling question for students? And there's lots of different ways that we can do that to set students up for success. So don't let, inquiry get short shrift for elementary school. There's a lot that they can engage with here. All right, finally, the last one that I want to show you here are heritage months. And this is probably my favorite. In my classroom, what I had is I had around the classroom, on one wall, we had women and groups of women that we admired. We had Black History Month. We had Asian American and Pacific Islander Month. And we had lots of different groups and leaders and events to really have students' identities be shown around the room. And not to say that we only celebrate those things one or two times a year. We incorporate it into our curriculum all year long, but we also find lots of ways to celebrate special ones and to understand what we commemorate. So I'll show you a little bit of where that lives. I put the link in your chat again, want to make it a little easier for you here, but I can find it by going to our supplemental social studies collections and then going to heritage months, where we also have holidays and memorials as well. So this is really great because if I go into here, like if I click Celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, we want to recognize this is not a monolithic experience for, all Hispanic people have had the same experiences. No way. But we want to introduce students to what this means, to different elements of Hispanic culture, as well as celebrating Hispanic Americans and Hispanic people and the arts and sciences. So here are each of those lessons and how we can support students with them, of course, in each lesson with our lesson sparks. All right, so that's a little bit about our heritage months. Are there any questions? Please put them in the chat. All right, I've only my signature 13 seconds for questions. Keep those them coming in the chat, and our whole team will help you out with that. But I want to pivot here to talk a little bit about what we know about students. We know that the resources that we've shown are super relevant to students. They show they're back in the news. These people you're going to find similarities between yourselves and them. But oftentimes, students don't immediately perceive that relevance. So how can we launch one of these wonderful lessons, these units, so that we can immediately establish buy-in with students so they perceive this relevance right away? So here's a few ways to immediately launch these lessons to have students see the relevance. One, start out by asking them a provocative question that they can answer from personal experience. For example, if you ask students about who do they think the most influential person in the world is, it'll prime their brains to think about the way power is achieved and wielded. And you might get some crazy answers from a TikTok influencer to Elon Musk or who knows. Secondly, you can introduce a mystery or a challenge to motivate their learning. For example, historians have long debated the shot heard round the world. Who shot first in the American Revolution, the British or the colonists? So, having students dive into primary sources from each side can help them engage in this real world mystery or challenge. And thirdly, you can establish the stakes of what you're studying. If you're discussing the dangers of misinformation online, students will be more likely to recognize the far-reaching consequences of misinformation in their upcoming lesson on censorship if they've been, acclimated to or oriented to the stakes of that. Amazing. And one way that you can also support this immediate establishment of relevance is through multimodal resources. Now, as a social studies teacher, I got a bad rap looking back. I was way too text based in the things that I used as resources for students. So, if I could go back, I would make sure I'm providing lots of different access points for students so that they can engage in this. We all learn in different ways and have different preferences as well. So I like to mix it up. So by using multimedia like Newsela has maps, infographics, political cartoons, propaganda, photos, art and image banks, and videos, we can use those to really help our students engage and launch this lesson right away by taking a look at an image. Maybe this shows forced indigenous assimilation in the early 19th century. And one way I love to do that is through some videos. I want to show you a special collection of videos, and I'm going to put it in the chat as well. And by going to our videos, I'll go scroll down to the bottom, social studies videos. You'll see those multimedia sources here with the maps, infographics, etc. But okay, Annie, you're getting distracted here. Let's go to social studies videos. We'll go to making real world connections and take a look at this. Students can watch a video here to immediately launch relevance. Are you being spied on? Talking about surveillance, talking about different laws at different times in American history where privacy, surveillance, and censorship have played a role. So all of these are a really great way to launch a lesson to get students to establish the stakes of them. Amazing. So take a look at that link. Again, I'm going to send you all these links in a follow-up at the end of today. So feel free to, don't worry, like you need to hold on to those for dear life. Fantastic. All right, let's continue to our student polls. We can also establish relevance and when we assign an article on Newsela to gauge background information, or maybe we can gauge student interest, or maybe we can ask a provocative question, as we said earlier. So, for example, I might have my students do a four corners activity, a social studies teacher's favorite, on before reading an article on what is globalization, to prime them to help make predictions about the text. So, for example, on this article on globalization, I can add in this poll here. I'm going to show you how to do it in real time so that you know how to do this as well. Okay, so I saved this article, What is Globalization, in my content library here. And here it is. So it's a great article, but I want to get my students thinking before this to start to anticipate or understand some of the big questions that are here. One of the things I can do is turn on the student poll. And there's so many great options here. Read the article title. I mean, how many of us were trying to get students to read the title and the directions, right? This is a great way to start that. You can ask them to look at the header image. What emotions does it convey? We all speak emoji. This is a great way to get them thinking. But you can also totally edit this in any way you want. And I'm going to put a controversial statement here. I'm going to put in it is better for a country to try and grow everything its people need on its own rather than buying and trading goods with other countries around the world. Ooh, so I want to ask students, I didn't save this here. I'll go back here. I want to ask students whether they strongly agree, whether they agree, whether they disagree or strongly disagree with this. And think about that as a great way that you can, gauge what students, strongly disagree, that you can gauge where students are at. You can then see if their opinion changed after reading the article too. A great way for to launch the relevance of this lesson. And if you're looking for other ways to hook students into this lesson, I might recommend that you use the Luna Lesson Planner function that we have and take a look at opportunities that it has to hook students here. Here's how that works. If you scroll below the image, below the accessibility toolbar, you'll see this apply to your lesson Luna box here. I'll click open the lesson planner here and just note students don't see this. This is for teachers, how you can use Luna, our AI teaching assistant, to help you create a lesson for this. So here's what I can do for that. I can provide an objective for my students here. I want to say, I want my students to identify the pros and cons of globalization. I'll tell Luna what is the standard that we're working towards here. And actually, I think I want to use the seventh grade ones. It's for ELA, but I want them to be able to analyze these interactions between individuals, events, and ideas. That's what I'm going for here. You can filter it by, social studies here in your grade and your state. It should pop up based on what you told Newsela about where and what you teach. Put that in. Hey, include a project idea, supports for multilingual learners. Yes, please. And then I can generate a lesson plan. Now, this is going to generate a lesson plan. You can use whole cloth, you can use part and parcel of it. I want to really focus on the hook that comes with it so that I can, again, try to establish this immediate relevance for my students. Fantastic. I mean, this is something that you can print out, put on your door if you're going to be observed that way, so that you that day, so that you have, justified all of your choices here. So students are going to analyze interactions between individuals, events, and ideas in the article to identify the pros and cons of globalization. Perfect. I will scroll down and I want to focus on the lesson breakdown where there's a great introduction and hook, beginning by asking students what they know about globalization. It's got that word global in it. Isation's kind of like a process. Maybe it means, oh, I've heard of that before, where there's a McDonald's in every country, and they can start by unpacking prior knowledge in that way. So, great ways to use some of our tools on Newsela based on what your objective is. For us, it is growing relevance in the social studies classroom. Fantastic. Questions? Feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat. Well, while you're typing questions, I also want to make sure that we have, Nancy, can students see the poll results live? That's a great question. No, just the educator who assigned it can see it. So what you can do is you can show that assignment, and then you will see, 50% said strongly agree, 10% said agree, and you might choose to show that to students to engage them in how the class is already feeling. But no, students won't see how others uh, shared their thoughts. Great. Happy to hear that, Suzanne. Of course, Nancy. I want to hear from you now. I've done a lot of talking here, as I am wont to do. And I want to hear from you about one way that you will use Newsela to make connections between your students and your curriculum. Feel free to share in the chat one way you'll use Newsela to make connections. Maybe you'll use one of those real world connections videos. Maybe you will. Yeah. Tamara, can you show where you found the kids and teens and other links? Absolutely. I will show you that. I will share that resource with you right now, and I will put it in the chat. I made this resource here. Oh, Kevin's going to use videos. Absolutely. Here is the resource. This is, if you're going to save one of them, save this. It's a bit.ly called Newsela Social Studies. And in it, you will see this resource that I made. It has our featured collections that we talked about, and we have lots of great resources at the bottom here, including a survey if you want to tell us, how today went, if it was helped you, or any questions that you have. Our event calendar, getting started hub, efficacy studies I talked about. And you can just click any of these to access one of the links that I told you about. So that's a quick way to do that. Amazing. Okay, we'll go back to our question that I had asked here. Kevin's going to use videos. Jasmine said, make extra credit text sets to connect HMH. Fantastic. A social studies curriculum complement that we have, modules. Rita likes the poll question. Shannon said, I'm new to Texas history, but I do like to engage students with polls. Fantastic. Sometimes, being new to something makes you an even better teacher so you can anticipate what are the questions and roadblocks some students might come in. So, all right. Suzanne said, Newsela allows all the students to read the same information and feel included. Absolutely. That accessibility, when we prioritize that, can be really powerful. Tamara's going to use videos. Amazing. Nancy is designing a hands-on timeline activity using the prehistory video. Love it. I want to make sure you know where our timeline graphic organizer is as well. I think that can help you just to make Newsela a one-stop shop here, just so you can see all the bells and whistles we have. If you search for graphic organizer, you can see all the ones that are printable. If you look on our assignments, those are digitally fill-outable for students. And then these are alphabetized by title here. So I'll go to our timeline here. Timeline activity. So this could be a great one to print out to use, Nancy, with your activity. Amazing. Suzanne is echoing that accessibility. Mary is saying incorporating students' cultural heritage into learning is especially important since you teach ESL students. Absolutely. We see our students as rich repositories of knowledge, and any time that we can acknowledge that and bring it into the classroom, it begets belonging and community and makes students feel seen, which is an important part of the learning process. Thanks so much for sharing and emphasizing that with us. It's great to hear all the different ways. I'm so glad that some things resonated with you, and how you can help make connections between your students and curriculum to make social studies relevant as we know it can be and is. Fantastic. Happy to hear that, David. You like the timeline printouts. There's tons that we have there as well. Corroborating accounts as well, which can be really great for social studies. We have the adamant method for analyzing primary sources, which could be really good. Identify the audience, the date, etc. Oh, great. Happy to hear that, Lori. Thanks for sharing. Wonderful. Feel free to share any other ways you'll make connections and any questions that you have as well. Yeah, Suzanne, the 250th anniversary is a great way to start the year for all of us. What does that mean? How do we commemorate that? Yeah, you can find that. You might have noticed it in our social studies collection. It comes up at the top of what is featured, of course. We have a special collection of celebrating 250 years of America with lots of different resources to take this in the direction that you want. Do you want to go back to 1776, or do you want to focus on different elements of America's evolution? Yes, show the different celebrations. Yeah. Great. Amazing. Yes, it's a very ripe time for social studies teachers to grab that moment. All right. Well, everyone, as Dickens would say, our time grows short. But I was so happy to be here with you all today.